Episode 42 of the Bmoney Beastin podcast. I'm here with Joe Kania. This guy is about to tell us an amazing story as we maneuver through his career and his wrestling career and things like that. But he was the original marketing director for Flo, way back when. Did some marketing for the Buccaneers, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the New York Giants, and he owns his own marketing firm today. Amazing individual, Joe Kania. What's up, man?
There we go. I appreciate you having me on, man. I know you've been chasing me down, but
yeah, we had that conversation, I want to say a month ago. Is that about right? Maybe a little more.
Yeah.
And we just kind of chatted about like life and sports and a little bit of everything. And you kind of asked me about Matt Clash, and then I asked you about the wrestling game that you created online. And we just kind of played with ideas. And then you gave me some really cool advice on this is how I would play with social media, and this is how I would do this, and this is how I would do this. And I've implemented a lot of those things, and it works. It works. So I really enjoyed that conversation, and I know you got a lot of things going on, and I really appreciate you giving me some of your time to just sit and chat. But I kind of want to start, if we could, tell me the origins. I think people would want to hear this, and I want to hear it. What were the origins of Flo? How did you get involved in that, and how did you blow it up like you did?
Oh, so I'm gonna take you down a rabbit hole here. So I'm from New Jersey. I wrestled at Bergen Catholic. I went to Bloomsburg with Coach Stutz. I was going to wrestle there. I never really wrestled. So I graduated high school 2009. So college dropout, delivering pizzas in 2011. And Flo was just kind of picking up. And for me, I thought that was the coolest thing ever because it was so authentic, right? I've worked across all different types of media, but I was like, these guys are really raw, they're really authentic, and this is really creative. So I kind of started a little, this kind of kickstarted my career, a little kind of Jersey spinoff of Flo. I called it Garden State Wrestling, and we go around and do terrible little videos, and we live streamed their All-Star match one year. We had 5,000 people watching online in 2011. Wow. And as I'm doing the Garden State Wrestling thing, I meet Joe Williamson at a tournament in New Jersey, who's just the best dude. I don't know anyone who you talk to. There are very few people where every single person you run across, they're great guy, awesome dude. Joe, awesome dude. We met. He gave me a t-shirt. He asked me if I wanted to do a video about Garden State Wrestling, and I regret now saying no because that would be cool to have. And Joe and I just kind of kept in touch. So I will say I wasn't the original marketing person. I came on there in 2017.
Okay.
So as they had maybe 100,000 followers, 10,000 followers on Instagram, maybe 100,000 total. Still very small in the digital side. And I remember I was at the Buccaneers. In the NFL, they have a very strict hierarchy, right? You're a coordinator, you're a manager, you're a director, you're a VP, and you're a chief. They're very specific about that. So I'm coordinator at the Buccaneers. I've got the trophy sitting there we had the best website, number one website in the NFL in engagement, 2015.
That's awesome.
The director leaves, the manager leaves above me, and we get a new CMO. So I'm like, okay, cool. This is my time. Bump me up to a manager. I was at the Bucs for 3 years. I was at the Giants for 2 before that. It's I kind of deserve this. So, okay, they're kind of stringing me out for half the season. I'm running the whole department by myself for half the season. New CMO calls a all-hands meeting after work hours in the auditorium where the players have, team meeting. Says, we're going to have org chart meeting tonight. Okay, fine. And we sit down, and I don't mean to rag on him because he's a good guy, but this guy comes out with this tiny little headset running on the stage, and he's jumping and he's pointing this like Steve Jobs type of. So, okay. And the end of the org chart meeting, he basically says, there is no org chart. Everyone keep doing what you're doing.
Okay.
I said, all right. And I'd been in communication with Joe for, I don't know, 5 years plus at this point, and I knew they were hiring. So I walked out of that meeting at the Bucs into the back onto the practice field, and I gave him a call. I was like, hey, you guys still looking for, and that kind of got me over there.
So I guess what we missed here, you started the Garden State Wrestling, but did that lead you to Tampa Bay, right?
I wish it did. I wish it was that easy.
I mean, you were there, and then you ended up in Tampa, and then you ended up at Flo, right?
I'm going to take you down a couple of rabbit holes. So I started Garden State Wrestling, and I was like 20 at the time.
Okay.
Right? So I knew nothing about journalism, but I knew a lot about the New Jersey high school scene because a lot of these guys were like my friends. I was only 2 years removed from high school. So I started Garden State Wrestling, and I just kind of cold outreached to the Star Ledger, which is the biggest newspaper in New Jersey. I saw that their wrestling writer had retired. This was like the turn of digital. So all print was turning into digital, web-based. And I just I showed up like a clown in a suit with a tie into the newsroom and like a resume, and just kind of pitched them, right? I was like, this is what I do. And interestingly enough, the Star Ledger said, well, we need someone who can make video. I was pitching them on wrestling. And again, it's a turn of digital. So they were like, oh, someone who knows how to make video. I had been inspired by Flo and the type of videos they made. I made video for Garden State Wrestling. And in the process, I would like barter services with people. Say, teach me a little bit about Final Cut, and I'll put you on the website. So I learned a little bit about video. So Star Ledger kind of thought I was a bozo, probably, and I definitely was a bozo. But they were like, yeah, we need someone that can do video for football in the fall. I was like, all right, cool. Sign me up. I did video. I did a good job. And then wrestling came along. Like, I'm from a blue-collar type background. Like, I don't win on being smart. I just win on working hard. Yeah. And I remember when I got into the Star Ledger, I wrote a preview for every single team in New Jersey. 400 teams. And, like, I'm not coming from a media space. I had no experience. Like, my barometer of what was hard was what I thought was hard. There was no precedent set. Preview of every single team in New Jersey. I've got another little trophy for Journalist of the Year, my second year with the Star Ledger. And as they saw promise in my enthusiasm and my subject matter expertise, they kind of taught me. This is how you write a lead. This is how the first high school football story I ever read, the editor rolled his eyes so hard, I can see it to this day. It was so bad. And he basically was just like, go sit down. And he rewrote the whole story. But while I'm at the Star Ledger, again, this is the turn of digital. So there were a couple like old head type journalists that had been there for 20 or 30 years. And they were very resentful of where the space was going. I always remember some guy was like, I made a bad career choice, man. I shouldn't have done this. So I'm paying attention, right? And I mean, shoot, just like asking worked once. And maybe I was a megalomaniac, but I just found someone's email at the New York Giants and said, what's up, man? I'd love to work there. And that's what I'm saying. And one of the most exciting moments of my career in general was they emailed me back and said no, but they emailed me back. And I was like, this is so cool. I was like, the Giants emailed me. So I emailed them once a month for, I don't know, a year. Hey, this is what I'm up to. Just wanted to check in. They started, this wouldn't work in today's age where I don't think it would work. They started to get kind of eccentric. It's like, I'll mop the floors. You don't have to pay me. Like almost kind of like a little bit of like psycho behavior type. If I
You
saw
were
it
creating
now,
your own opportunity, which is awesome. Continue.
well, shoot. So eventually they go, would you be interested in coming in for an interview to be a transcriptionist? Listen to interviews all day and type out what people were saying for like local media. And I was like, yeah, well, yes. I showed up for the interview already in training camp gear. I went to like Modell's and I had like a little visor and a polo, like to the interview.
I love it.
And the guy who I interviewed with for that position had worked for the Star Ledger 25 years ago. And I mean, my approach there, I know my capabilities, particularly at this point. I said, all right, I'm just going to work really hard and I'm going to impress them with that. Like it worked with me at the Star Ledger. I have this opportunity. Here's a story for you. My first day at the Giants was an intern, right? The transcriptionist is the lowest level in the entire organization. The people who take the trash out have a better gig than the transcriptionist. I had a little foot pedal and headphone that type all day. My first day there, they had all the interns sit in a circle, like an intro. This one kid sits in his chair and he says, hey, I'm Billy. I went to this college and my uncle knows this person. I'm like, okay. Then the next person, he kind of sets a tone. The next person does the same thing, right? And they go through 10 of them. And by the time it gets to me, I'm like, everybody here knows somebody. I'm the only person sitting in this room who didn't get hooked up by mommy or daddy or Aunt Susie or whatever. So I was like, okay. I stood up out of my chair. All these kids are sitting down. And I said, I'm so grateful to be here. Like, I'm so excited. I can't wait to learn. Because what am I going to say? I didn't go to college. I didn't graduate from college. I don't know anybody. I was like put on the spot. And yeah, shoot, that first year at the Giants, I'm driving my $500 Lincoln Mark 7 diesel 87. Windows don't open, paint's all beat up. And I would go and I would intern at the Giants from 9 to 4. And then I'd go straight from there into the newspaper and work from 4 to midnight every day. And they would ask me, they'd like bust on me. They'd be like, Joe, you still working at the paper? I say every day until midnight. So that's what I was trying to leave them with. Like, I'm a dog. Like, I don't think I know anything, and you know, I could sit here and say good things about the Giants organization all day, because who takes someone in like that? Like, it gives me goosebumps thinking about that. They gave me an opportunity. I go in on my day off. They would like give me food to take to they had a really sick cafeteria. They had like steaks stacked up on, give me food to bring to the newspaper for like the night shift. Really, really good people.
I'll say this as a joke on the Giants, though. You said who takes people like that? Well, they drafted Daniel Jones.
Well, a critique of Wellington Mara and the Giants is that they can occasionally be loyal to a fault. Like those people, I'll go walk in the building 10 years later and like open arms, like. So
that family, from what I've seen, like on documentaries and things, they're a really good family. I think what I took from that's really cool is that you literally created your own opportunity. And you're probably right. In today's world, that probably wouldn't work. but there's so many people now that just want something given to them, right? Like just, hey, I want this, let me have it. But you just kept pecking away and pecking away and pecking up, really at something that was kind of a pipe dream in a way, if you think about it. Hey, I want to go work for the New York Giants, right? I'm going to email them every week, every month. So that's really cool because that shows right there that you can create your own opportunities. And I think that's a good message for kids to hear, for young people to hear, that if you have something you want to do, you have to find a way to make it happen. And just like you did. So this is amazing. You were working literally from 9 to midnight, 9 in the morning till midnight. You were probably sleeping about 5 hours a night max, right?
Living in the hood. I'm going back. I got, scary people living here. People jumping me when I'm getting home at 1 a.m.
So rough. So how did you? So from there, I'm guessing you ended up from there to the Bucks. Is that right?
So I just told my brothers, 10 years younger than me, I was telling them this story. I worked my first year at the Giants. I worked both jobs. And I was living on my own. I had to pay bills. That's another thing that I think it's important for kids to hear, particularly kids from a background like me. If you're starting behind, you have to do extra. That's the way it is. So I went and I did the newspaper, paid my bills. And I had another full-time job on top of that where I had the foresight to say, okay, this is a job that pays the bills. This is a job that's going to get me ahead. I got enough time. So I worked both that first season. Coming into my second season at the Giants, the Star Ledger as a newspaper completely folds. And they're rehiring everyone under the digital company. It's like a totally new company. When I worked for the newspaper, I worked for a subcontracted company that handled high school sports and obituaries, which was an interesting mix. But when they closed the newspaper, everyone was hired under the digital company. So one, they made me very thoroughly interview for my job again. The same year I won Wrestling Journalist of the Year when I was 21 or 22. I'm proud. I got that next to the little mug sitting here. So I was a little offended that they made me interview at all, right? I was proud of my work. But they told me, they said, because you now work for the digital company also covers the Giants. When you were at the newspaper, it was subcontracted. You technically were paid by a different company. You can't do both. It's conflict of interest.
Oh,
so no. I go back to the Giants and I was like, please let me come back. Please. And they don't take interns for 2 years, right? I was like, I'll do the same position. I don't care. And so they technically, I couldn't be an intern for a second year, but I made a good impression, right? The guy who I worked for was a legendary journalist. I learned a ton from transcribing, right? My 21 and 21-year-old, I'm spending my day listening to Bill Parcells and Tom Coughlin and Eli Manning. That's what my 8 hours a day, that's who I was surrounded by and listening to them talk, how they think. So to the credit of the Giants, my boss tells me, he was like, well, you're technically not allowed to come back for a second year. So how about you just show up on the first day and we'll be like, well, the season's already here. What are we going to do? He couldn't offer me anything. So I was at a crossroads, right? Where I could say, well, I can keep this job that I know probably won't really get me where I want to go, or I can take a risk here, quit my job, show up to the Giants on day one and hope they don't say, go home. So fortunately I showed up on the first day and, at that point I'm the leader of the interns because I've been through it. Everyone else is new. and I went through. The Giants are so loyal, nobody leaves. Everyone who I worked with there more than 10 years ago is still working there. Positions don't open up frequently. So I was going through, and it gets to like week 12, 13, 14. I'm like weeks out of a job. I'm like, I don't have enough money. I saved just enough. Giants paid me $10 an hour. So I had like just enough money to. A lot of that teams like that don't even pay people. It's like the money was insignificant. I saved up enough to last me through the season. I didn't really have a plan. I was like, I really hope this works. And around week 14 or 15, they referred me to the Buccaneers. They gave me like a real full-time job. And I got in my, at this point, I now have a $500 Toyota hoopty. And I threw all my stuff in that car. I said, please just get me to Florida from New Jersey. I said, this car, just get me there and I'm good. And I drove by myself all the way from New Jersey down to Florida and started working with the Bucs.
Dude, back to what we were just saying a minute ago. Creating your own opportunities, which, you brought up how kids that are behind already have to do more. When you mentioned you were like a blue collar kid, dude, the basis of what I've built with Bmoney Beastin is based around those blue collar kids because that's who I was. I remember trying to go to football practice as a kid, and I never stole anything in my life. That's like a big thing, like a pet peeve about me. But I always borrowed the neighbor kid's bike to go to football practice and back. And it was like a mile ride. And I would put my shoulder pads on one handlebar and my helmet on the other. And because I wanted to play, and I didn't have a ride and it was like a mile away. And I always put it back and right where it was every time. But you're completely right on that. And one thing that a lot of people, though, don't have the guts to do, and I don't blame them because I'm very conservative in a lot of ways. Like most of the time I'll lean towards the safer option, if that makes sense, right? Like most people would. Now I have done wild things like you just did, but not to that extent. And for you to say, hey, I'm going to make this work. I'm going to roll the dice. And it led to a full-time job in the NFL. That is mind-blowing. Like, dude, props to you.
When you got nothing, it's like it's easy to go for broke when it's like I grew up in a house, had one shower, 7 people, it would rain downstairs and turn the shower on. It's like I think part of caution in taking the safe route is you have something that you're protecting. Something, anything, when you've got literally nothing. I've got no degree. I hardly know how to do anything. At that point, I'm like 320 pounds. Like, I was like, I got nothing to lose. So take a shot. Why not ask?
Man, I think that I would have been, you look back at your life sometimes and you ponder on how things like the butterfly effect, right? That's a real thing. One thing changes, everything changes. I had 2 sons really, really young in my life. And I feel like I'm glad I did. I love my children. Don't get that wrong when I say this. But had I not had them so young, I wonder if I'd have taken big swings like that. Because, I had the one thing I had to always look out for was the betterment of my kids, right?
Yep.
So if I didn't have that, it would have only been me. And if it was only me, I think I would have taken some swings because I so relate to everything you said where it's like, because to go back in time a little bit for me, just to kind of, it's not on the same scale. I never worked in the NFL, but I worked in cable, like my main job for years, right? And I wanted this promotion so bad. And they opened it up in like May and they were going to fill it in like July. I called this manager every other day for a month, right?
Yep.
Every other day. I was like, I'm your guy. Here's the layout. This is how I can do this. And sure enough, I got the job. But then you got to think about, you don't always, sometimes you don't always want what you wish for, because I got it and I wasn't happy. But in that realm, on a smaller scale, I so relate to what you were saying about sending the monthly emails. So you're kind of like a rabid dog. This is what I want. And I think that's an amazing quality. And I think that's a crazy story to kind of just, okay, I could end up homeless in my $500 Toyota, but I'm going for it. So we get from New York, they refer you, you get to the Bucs. When you got there, I'm just curious because I am a football fan too. Who was the star? Was Tom Brady there yet? Was it before Tom Brady? Jameis?
I got there 2 weeks. I remember the week before I got there, Josh McCown was crying at the podium. They were about to finish dead last in the league. So I got there 2 weeks before the end of the season, where we eventually drafted Jameis.
Dude, I got to say this before we continue. Jameis Winston is the most entertaining human being on the planet.
Well, getting to know him too, like, he's a good dude.
Is he?
He treats everybody, something that is like a small thing people don't think about. Remembers everyone's name.
Yeah.
Right? Says, "Morning, Joe. Hey, how you doing? Ask me a question about me." So he was a great dude, and he was a lot of fun. The problem when you're the number one overall pick is you're walking into a difficult situation.
Right.
Like, the team was the worst team in the league, so
And that happens, I feel like, that we're actually in draft season right now, right? Like, it's February, the draft's in April, and the combine's going on. And the crazy thing about the NFL is it's always kind of been like that. And you look at quarterbacks that busted over the years, right? Like, if you remember, like, Peyton Manning threw like a bajillion interceptions as his rookie year. I mean, I think it's something that still will never be broken again, right? That crazy amount. I don't know what it was. And then you had you had Ryan Leaf right behind him, which he was just crazy. But there's a lot of situations, number one picks, first round picks, that go to these environments that they don't have that support system around them. And most of the time, the coaching staff is already on a short leash, right? Because they've had a year or whatever. So now they're trying to force them to get these wins as fast as possible in an impossible environment. So that is tough. And I can definitely see that, for Jameis and that, because I remember that time period. But then when you look when Brady come in, and, my Evans is still playing, getting 1,000 yards a year,
he's
right?
another great dude. I love Mike.
I am such a fan of him. And you look at that, though, he was on that roster, if I'm not wrong, right, at that point in time already. And then when they brought Brady in, first round pick, they take Wirfs, right? So they get him a left tackle. Then they bring Gronk in. Like, they started putting pieces around for Brady. You got to do the same things for the young quarterbacks. And a lot of times you don't see that.
To be fair, they drafted Jameis, and then they drafted Donovan Smith to play left tackle next. And then they drafted Ali Marpet to play right guard.
I remember.
So they went quarterback, and then they went lineman. I mean, Ryan Leaf is a good example, but how many people remember Steve Young's career with the Buccaneers?
Oh, yeah, dude. Like, if he would have stayed in Tampa Bay, you'd never know who he was. He'd just be one of those flash in the pan guys. When he got sent to the 49ers and they had that big debate. Now, this is before I was born, but I remember the stories and things where Montana didn't want to step away, right? And they had that kind of quarterback controversy for a few years or whatever. Dude, when he was plugged into that situation, Rice and that team, Jesus, like
Bill Walsh.
Yeah, Bill Walsh. Yeah, that whole situation was just set up. It was like a plug and play. Like, you could just plug and play almost. And he was a great quarterback, don't get me wrong. But imagine taking a guy that's like a big first-round bust that had, like, all the tools and plug him into that offense and see if he doesn't succeed. Does that make sense?
Steve's a perfect example because he went to Bucks, let him go.
Yeah.
And he goes, he becomes a Hall of Famer. Same guy, 2 different scenarios.
And it happens.
I always, it's a cliche, but football is the ultimate team game. If
Absolutely.
people don't want to think that the impact your defensive tackle has on your quarterback, but if your defensive tackle is good and you can stop the run, now you force opposing offenses into passing situations. They're in passing situations, they have shorter drives. Quarterback gets the ball more.
I feel
Chain
like
effect.
the Eagles just created the blueprint, the new blueprint, with athletes becoming bigger and faster and stronger than they've ever been now at this point in time. The Eagles defense outside of like 3 players feels like the Georgia Bulldogs for the past couple of years, right? Jordan Davis is like 6'8", 3, whatever he is, 46, whatever. And he ran like a 4.8 at the combine. It was like ridiculous. And then they got Jalen Carter the next year. And if you look, and Sweat, Sweat's been around a while, but if you look at how they built that up front back, and they did it with the offensive line too, because that offensive line, they said it during the Super Bowl, was like averages the biggest maybe ever, I think, in Super Bowl history or something. So they've kind of created this blueprint where if you and it was kind of created in a way in Tampa Bay the year that the Bucks beat the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. They beat them the same way the Eagles just beat them. They just got a lot of pressure on Mahomes, and they built that defensive line. And man, I think that moving forward, you're going to see, like, they've always drafted pass rushers really high, and every now and then you'll get a Ndamukong Suh or something that goes 3 or 5 or whatever. But I think there's going to be more defensive tackles going higher and higher and higher in the draft, because you're going to start seeing teams kind of build like, okay, this is how we can beat this. And you're always chasing the number 1 guy, right? Who's the number 1 guy? Mahomes. And the 2 teams that beat him in the Super Bowl beat him the exact same way. And I don't know. I love that, by the way, because I'm not a Mahomes fan. But when you got to the Bucks, what did you do there? And you were telling me about the training camp and how you ended up at Flo, and I want to lead into that. What exactly did you do in your day to day?
So they hired me to be like digital first staff writer. So they had a team writer for, I think, since the team existed, from '76. That same staff writer, but he wasn't geared towards like listicles and like digital written content. They're focused on the website. So they say, okay, we need another writer who can be complementary. Coming from my experience, though, I was very like data heavy, and like I cared a lot about numbers and performance.
Mm-hmm.
So I started as like staff writer, content manager, and by the time I was done there, I mean, everyone had left, so I was running all of their social. I was a guy. You could probably go back to that era and find some goofy tweets I was sending from the Bucks Twitter account. But I was running their social. I was running their website, coming up with the content plan, making content for everything, working with the video team, the graphic designers. And that little delta when I was a one-man show, I mean, later in life, when things are hard, like it gets me, enthusiastic now, because I can look at it and be like, well, yes, this is extremely difficult. That means it's extremely rare. So like what I'm doing is, yeah, it's hard, but no one else is doing it. So by doing that, I got a good taste for social, where you get a much larger performance data set. You get more numbers. You can see what works in almost instantly. And I kind of got into consummation of, what's the word I'm looking for? like how information is consumed. So I'm writing articles for the website. We have all these fancy NFL tech tools, and they would tell me 80% of people don't ever scroll on the article, or 15% of people get to the bottom. And that always stuck with me. I was like, damn, I'm writing this article. No one's even reading it. Could I tell this same message in like a picture and 12 words? So that was really valuable, because when I got to Flo, I went through that for a few years. We had a lot of success. But when I got to Flo, that's like exactly what they needed, because they were still 4 or 5 years behind in coming to that revelation.
Well, I feel like wrestling and the sport of wrestling in general, like right now, man, like Rockfin does a little bit of this and that, right? Which is kind of cool. You know, Flow is kind of the standard at this point, right? For like, you know, all these like cards they put together, and, you know, you got different USA state tournaments rolling on it and college matches and whatever, right? They're kind of got their hand in like everything, a little pot here and there. And that's kind of before that kind of came around, like before I ever seen Flo Wrestling, there really wasn't like, I mean, track would have like, you know, some video libraries from old matches and things, or you could, you know, stream, you know, this event or whatever but it just wasn't as big. I feel like Flo has really brought the sport to the forefront, right? Like in a way that we just haven't had before. Does that make sense? Like,
you couldn't. So the only people that were covering wrestling, there were no quasi mainstream wrestling only publications. People covered wrestling, but there was your Iowa College reporter that worked for the Des Moines Registrar, or your Penn State that works for whatever newspaper. People were covering it, but they were localized and regionalized. They were team focused, and those guys usually bounced beats. They did football in the fall, they did wrestling in the winter, they did baseball in the summer or in the spring, took the summer off. They weren't wrestling people, and there was also no way to watch wrestling.
right.
I never watched until I was in my 20s a college wrestling match. Ever. Where do you watch it? Rutgers was terrible. And like, they don't put it on TV, and there's no digital. So I think the first college wrestling match I ever went to was when I worked at Flo. Where do you go? You go to Rutgers in New Jersey, or, you know, Rutgers was like on the verge of having their program canceled. They were really bad.
You know, before, you know, the first college wrestling, anything I ever seen live was the Scuffle. You know, I live in North Georgia, so we're close to Chattanooga, Tennessee, and, you know, Chattanooga does the Southern Scuffle every year. And, you know, every year they'll send, you know, Penn State, Wyoming, you know, there'll be some decent teams come, but usually it's their backups, I'd say, for the most part. Every now and then a few stars will show up. And it's a really cool and fun, exciting environment that for the longest time, it's sad that there wasn't a way to just see it, because like now, like I was watching last Sunday, the freshman state USA wrestling tournament. I watched probably 800 matches Sunday. Okay.
Yep.
I would go from mat 1 to mat 8 to mat whatever, right? Just bouncing around. And I even posted a score of one on Instagram. It was like 23-18. It was like a football score. I was like, dude, that's a folk style match. So I was just enjoying watching wrestling, if that makes sense, right? Like I was enjoying being able to just watch matches. And for that to not have been available for so long, and you look at like the time period with like the Brands boys, right? Can you imagine like those like dual meets with like Iowa State, right? Back in those days, that would have been amazing, like to be a national broadcast, right? Like something you could see. And I seen this thing on TikTok. It's called, is it like reliving rivalries or dynasties or something? I seen it on TikTok. And this guy's bringing back old video footage from like Ohio State tournaments from like the 80s, late 70s through the 80s and 90s. And with social media, I think there'll be more of that happen. But how Flo Wrestling kind of built this, hub for everything, and you were a big part of that. I feel like that's what's really brought it forward. That's what I'm getting at. It's brought it forward, and more people can, the average person would say, when you say wrestling, they're going to say, oh, Stone Cold Steve Austin, right? They're going to say John Cena. They don't know we're talking about a sport. And then you're like, no, like you would do in school. Oh, what they do in the Olympics. They don't know there's a difference, right? So to bring that to the forefront is huge. So like you said, they had like Flo had like 10,000 Instagram followers when you took over there. And you said your strategy was trying to do things without the text, right? Like not as much text, just more visualized. Is that what you're trying to say, right? And then
what they had been doing is they had been delivering messages in the form of link posts back to articles. So I just explained what I saw at the Bucks on how people consume information. So I'm thinking, well, if 30,000 people see a Facebook post, I'm doing the math in my head. I'm like, 30,000 people see the Facebook post, 10% of them, 300 will finish the article. Right. So that means content as a form of marketing, you're trying to plant an idea in somebody's head. That's not an efficient way to plant an idea in someone's head, because 30,000 people had the opportunity to be spoken to. They were listening, but you deliver them a message in a way that 300 leave with the concept you're trying to deliver to them. So immediately, first thing I did is I said, I'm just going to go all in on Instagram. This is an era where it was like Throwback Thursday, and like they had like little themes, and people would post like once or twice a week. It's like a vanity platform. And I said, no, this is becoming a micro blog. I'm going to post 30 times a day. I don't care. It could be a picture with an emoji, but we're telling the story, right? We've got Austin DeSanto was a great example, because, we followed data and saw people were really interested in him. And we would communicate messages in a way that when 30,000 people see the message, 30,000 people leave with the concept we're trying to give them. So I think by the time I stopped working there, they had 500, 600,000 off 10,000. So
you were a big, massive part of that.
I mean, they had the brand, right? But
well, anybody can have a brand. You have to have people buy it.
And I mean, an interesting point that you brought up is, as I've been working in the internet since marketing on the internet existed. As we move up the funnel, right, we find new people, we reach more people, it becomes less special. So True. Like the New Jersey State Tournament, they have one class and they bring 15,000 people, pack an arena in Atlantic City, and like anyone who's there, like that was a meaningful experience for them. So as we reach more people through social, through digital broadcasts, watching the New Jersey State Tournament on my computer while I'm working is not the same as feeling the boardwalk shake sitting in the arena. So we say, like, is it growing wrestling? Well, there are more experiences being had, but significantly less impactful experiences. My fear is that people stop going to the New Jersey State Tournament because they can watch it, and it becomes less special and less sticky because it's like a fleeting,
I can see that point too, but I think that the main purpose with Flo in terms of growing the sport for me is that it's visually accessible to the majority of everyone, right?
Yes.
And like I feel like, and this is just a made up scenario, so just bear with me. But say you got a 10-year-old kid. You mentioned Austin DeSanto, right? That's actually my son's favorite wrestler, Austin DeSanto. And the truth is, my son is a lot like him because he's like, he's real unpredictable, and Bryson's real unpredictable. So it's like they kind of have the same personality, so it kind of makes sense. But like, imagine, I'll just use little Johnny, right? Like he's like a 10-year-old kid, and he loves Austin DeSanto. And every kid in the world now has a cell phone, right? Like every kid has a cell phone. And he's got a Flo account because his dad's got it, so he can watch his matches and say, "Hey, man, you didn't do a Granby roll the right way here, or you didn't, whatever." And so he's got it on his phone, and they're talking at recess. And hey, man, there's this guy Austin DeSanto. He's crazy. Check this out, right? Where he's like pushing on people's heads and telling them to shush and all this. And he shows this kid, and the next thing you know, he's like, "Well, what is that?" He goes, "Well, I wrestle." "Well, what's wrestling?" "Yeah, I go to this club." "Oh, cool. Can I come?" "Yeah, man. You want to go tonight?" You just brought somebody new into the sport, right? So I feel like in that scenario, I think that's where it helps grow. Now, when you start taking away from the live environment, because like I think to me, one of the coolest environments is like Tulsa. You ever been to the kids' Tulsa?
No.
It's like this big fishbowl in the middle of BFE in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And it's really cool, man. They do a really good job structuring it. You're like, it's this time to this time for like 8U, and this time to this time for 10U. It's great. But the first day is huge, dude. It's crazy. It's fun. There's vendors everywhere. And I think that's a really cool experience. Now, granted, people, the casual fan or whatever, or a kid that's not competing, you're not going to get people to just drive out there to watch it, right? Like just to watch. I mean, that just doesn't make sense. Now, if they're taking their kid out there, that's different. If a coach, is going to go coach a bunch of kids, that's different. So I don't know. Now, in the college, that's in like the youth space, but in like the college space, it kind of goes back to like the celebrity factor a little bit, right? To a kid, like let's talk about when Spencer Lee was at Iowa, right? Everybody in the state of Iowa wanted to just see Spencer Lee, right? So, I mean, they want to see him now. He's going to wrestle Ono, right? Like, they still want to see him. And they would, Dad, I want to go see Iowa. I want to go see Spencer Lee. So I think you got kind of a little bit of that celebrity effect. Same thing like right now with Starachi up there at Penn State. Dude, when he walks out to Michael Myers' theme song, like, that place like explodes. So like I don't know that it's ever really going to completely take away from like the fandom, like up close in person, because I think that there's something for the wrestling community that's already in the community that knows this, right? Like this is awesome here. But I think in terms of flow, like if you I got a business trip, I can watch it on the plane or whatever, right? That's cool. I don't necessarily think it's going to completely take away because, and I'm going to use a weird scenario here, but I think you'll understand it. You remember during COVID, right? When COVID hit, dude, for one, I was so bored that I think we all were, that actually COVID's what kind of sprung Bmoney Beastin. We wouldn't even be talking right now had I not got so bored I came up with a concept. But with that being said, I was watching anything I could watch. I was like just trying to kill time. And when I was a kid, I was a big WWE fan, right? And I grew up, like we talked about, Stone Cold and whatever. And I was flipping through the channels and I ran across SmackDown, right? They had like a match going, like a pro wrestling match going on. And they had these little boxes that were probably 8x8 and there were TV screens. And there was 1 million of them around the arena of people logged on through a Zoom or whatever they used, right, to look like they were in the crowd. And I remember watching as a kid, and the biggest kick of a pro wrestling match is the crowd reaction, right? Like you have to have like that reaction. And when there's nobody there, it just kind of takes away from it. And it's the same thing in like where you see some of these matches, like these international matches. Like I seen a Spencer Lee clip where he hit this nasty little high C he hit. It was just nasty how he finished. I forget what it was, but I posted it and put filthy because it was awesome. But there was nobody there. Like nobody.
I've been to those. I've been at tons of those international tournaments where 10 people in the stands watching house fighter.
So I don't see that. To me, it kind of takes away. Because, dude, when you're watching, even as a fan, like watching on like the Big Ten network or whatever, when a big takedown occurs or they get back points at a really crucial point in the match and the place explodes, you kind of get pumped too. You know what I mean? So I just feel like that. I just don't think that's really, as a community, I don't think that's going to go away. It could dwindle. I agree with what you said there. It could dwindle a little bit, but because, people are busy and whatever. But I think that crowd in sports, any sport, football, baseball, whatever, that crowd is crucial. And in wrestling, it's so unique because you almost have to understand the sport to know when to go crazy. And I feel like that crowd that is there supporting, they understand the sport to the point they can do that.
Yeah, and I mean, we had tried, I think it was Kyle Dake and Chamizo, when we did our first kind of like owned event. And I said, and I stressed like over and over again, guys, ambient sound is going to be a problem. I didn't have the solution, but it's like when UFC fights at the, whatever they call it, in Las Vegas, where it's like a tiny closed venue. You can't run an event where you can hear people slapping the mat or hearing the shoe squeak. Like if there's no ambient sound, whether it's music, if you have to, or piping in, you could realistically, if you have the camera angled down on the mat like this, you could pipe in crowd noise.
Oh,
it doesn't matter for the viewer. But I agree with you. I mean, I think accessibility is a net positive all around because I'm watching stuff that I'd have no ability to physically go to. More people are being exposed.
Yeah, like out here in North Georgia, man. Like my son grew up with Coach Matt Pitts. That was his club coach till about like 2 years ago. And we loved the guy. He wrestled at UT Chattanooga when Terry Brands was the coach at UT Chattanooga. And I've got actually my partner in Bmoney Beastin too, Quantal. He wrestled for Brands at Chattanooga. I've heard some wild stories about Terry Brands. With that being said, all the little guys coming up now through the Grindhouse Club, they all love Iowa, right? Maybe one kid out of that club's ever been to Iowa, right?
Yep.
But it's the connection through Pitts to Brands. And, and I think that, that's a great thing that kids can, it's almost like he's larger than life. Like the Brands boys are kind of like this new generation's like Dan Gable, right? Like that kind of thing. Like, so it's kind of cool. Everybody loves like Iowa, or then now Kale. Like Kale's like Darth Vader, right? They never lose. And so I feel like that's the cool thing. There's so many of these guys now that are coaching clubs and teams and middle schools and whatever that were connected to these big time coaches years and years past and have connections to these major colleges. And it's still creating a fan base. Does that make sense? Like it's funneling in
the fan base. You can reach more people. It's more open market, right?
Yeah.
It's not, I live in Iowa, I'm an Iowa fan. I live in Iowa, I'm getting exposed to everyone. I can choose who I actually like instead of reading the newspaper about what Iowa did or get Iowa State once a year on TV. You have more options.
I love it, dude. I love it. I mean, I'm wearing an Alabama hat. I hate the state of Alabama. I like the football team. So that's kind of how that goes. Tell us now, man, in closing, we'll close up. What you got your own marketing firm now. You want to tell us like what you do, what you've been kind of working on, anything like that?
Yeah, so my angle, technically I'm a marketing agency. My angle is I do all of the work myself for my clients. Most marketing agencies, you talk with me, I sell you, and then I assign a project manager, the project manager assigns junior level people to do your work. And now the message gets diluted through layers of communication, and it's low quality work, right? It's like the person that's doing the work never even met the client. So, I mean, my competitive advantage is I'll just work harder than everyone else. It's like if I yesterday I had meetings at 4 a.m. and 4:30 a.m. So no problem. Because I can look at it and be like, well, this is hard. That's great. No one else is going to do this. So I
love that you keep saying that, man, because, early on, I kept like second guessing everything I was trying to do, right? Because and you can admit this. I mean, you're there, you've done it. You've rolled the dice more than I ever have, I think. But entrepreneurship is hard, right? Like selling anything is hard, and trying to build something that is relatable and useful and practical and covers so many boxes is sometimes really difficult, right? Like, and I feel like I love that slogan. I love that. This is hard, great. I love that because, dude, I can tell you, man, I've been down some roads with just my project here, and like, I helped build I was in the early stage of building an e-learning company years ago, and I've been there. It's hard. Let's go. Full steam ahead. Let's roll. So I love that, dude. How can people, which I'm going to, of course, you're very, very popular on Instagram and things already, but tell people how they can reach you, look out for you, follow you, that kind of thing.
Oh, it's CaniaMedia.com. It's my little website. Check me out. We had, one of my clients got a deal on Shark Tank a couple of weeks ago.
That's fun.
I work with everyone from one-man startup to publicly traded companies. So, yeah, apparently my dad's Polish. So apparently Kania is a pretty common Polish last name, but it's easy to find me on social media.
Awesome, man. Joe, this was awesome, dude. I really appreciate your time. This has been a great conversation. You have an awesome story. You have a great lesson in your story, too, that if you just keep kind of beating down doors, you're going to get where you want to go. And I think that that's a great message for anyone and everyone. And you learning skills throughout the process to build yourself to where you are now is so, dude, you got a great story. And I appreciate you sharing it with us.
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't note that for every one of these 5 to 10 successful projects, I got 500 of them in the closet that didn't work. So part of the lesson there too is, and you get this from wrestling. Anyone who works with me, they hear about wrestling, they know nothing about it. They hear about it's like, so what? Hey, you lost. This didn't work. Like, I think people get discouraged really easily, or they become hesitant after they fail once or twice. And it's like, I mean, all I do is swing and I strike out. It's like baseball. It's literally like baseball. If you strike out 60% of the time, you're in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, dude. I told my dad this today. I had a conversation with my dad. He said, dude, you're doing it. I was like, because, I'm the first semi-entrepreneur in my family ever, right, that tried to build something from scratch. And I said, Dad, you don't get it, man. Like, I'm still scratching and clawing, buddy. He said, but you're doing it. I said, yeah. I said, but the reason I'm doing it is because I'm not going to quit under any circumstance. And where you said you had 5 of them that were great and you had 500 in the closet, dude, I'm right there with you, brother. I'm right there with you. Let's stay in contact, man. If there's anything I can ever do for you or we can do together, I'd love to also speak about maybe something. I think I've had some ideas I've been thinking about me and you could probably do together.
I love ideas.
Yeah, I've been pondering, but this has been great, man. I appreciate you. Episode, what were we at?
42
of the Bmoney Beastin podcast. Joe Kania, great guy. Check him out. Peace.